Three thugs corner a single mother and her 8-year-old son in a late-night grocery store, demanding protection money she can't afford. The leader grabs the terrified child's wrist, squeezing until he cries, while his crew blocks every exit. But the quiet night clerk removing his glasses and baseball cap isn't just another store employee. This is Mike Tyson himself. The bully has no idea he just threatened a child in front of the most feared heavyweight champion who ever lived. While the thug waves his switchblade and brags about owning the neighborhood, Iron Mike steps forward with the cold fury that once made grown men refuse to enter the ring. The store owner's face goes white with recognition as the legend assumes his classic peek boost stance. The punks keep laughing, thinking they're intimidating some old man. But they're about to learn why Tyson was called the baddest man on the planet. What happens when street thugs meet a boxing destroyer in his own neighborhood? Will the bullies survive 30 seconds against pure dynamite in human form? What happened next would terrorize the punks for the rest of their pathetic lives. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra. Special for you, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Frank methodically stocked the cereal aisle. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night at Palmer's Family Grocery, and the worn linoleum floors reflected the harsh lighting that made everything look slightly yellow. Frank kept his Yankees cap pulled low over thick-rimmed glasses, his broad shoulders straining against a simple grocery store polo that had seen better days. 3 months he'd been working the night shift, and Frank had settled into a comfortable rhythm. His powerful hands, surprisingly gentle for their size, arranged boxes of cornflakes with the same careful precision he applied to everything. The other employees called him quiet, reliable. Customers found him helpful in that soft-spoken way that made people feel safe walking to their cars alone after midnight. "Frank, you're a godsend," wheezed Mrs. Patterson as she struggled with a case of water bottles near the checkout. The 78-year-old widow came in every Tuesday like clockwork, buying the same items she'd probably purchased for 50 years. "No trouble at all, Mrs. P." Frank's voice carried a slight lisp that some customers found endearing. He lifted the heavy case like it weighed nothing, loading it into her cart alongside her cat food and TV dinners. "How's Mr. Whiskers doing?" "Oh, that old Tom is fine. Keeps me company since Harold passed." She patted Frank's massive forearm with a wrinkled hand. "You remind me of my grandson, you know? Same gentle way about you." Frank smiled, the expression transforming his face completely. "You drive safe now. Roads get slippery this time of night." From behind the register, Morris Keller watched the interaction with the same mixture of respect and nervousness he'd shown Frank since day one. The 65-year-old store owner clearly appreciated having someone reliable on the night shift, but there was something in Morris's eyes whenever he looked directly at Frank. Something like recognition wrestling with disbelief. Frank noticed everything. It came naturally after years of reading people, situations, environments. He saw which customers counted their money twice before shopping. He knew Mrs. Rodriguez worked 3 jobs to support her grandchildren. He could spot trouble walking through those automatic doors before it announced itself. The store settled into its late-night quiet, broken only by the hum of refrigeration units and the occasional car passing on Northern Boulevard. Frank continued his work, restocking protein bars near the pharmacy section. He kept a small stash of them in the break room along with gallon jugs of milk. Old habits. The automatic doors chimed their electronic welcome, and Frank glanced up from his inventory clipboard. A young woman entered with a small boy clinging to her hand. She looked exhausted, still wearing hospital scrubs under a worn winter coat that had seen too many Queen's winters. The child rubbed his eyes sleepily, stumbling slightly as he tried to keep up with his mother's purposeful stride. Diane Mitchell. Frank had noticed her before during these late-night runs. Hardworking nurse pulling doubles at Queen's General, shopping after her shift because it was the only time she had. Single mother doing her best with limited resources, always making sure her son stayed close in the bright fluorescent safety of Palmer's Family Grocery. Frank watched as Diane pulled a small wallet from her purse, counting bills with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew exactly how much she could spend. The boy, Tommy, Frank had heard her call him, helped select apples with the serious concentration only 8-year-olds brought to such tasks. Something about their quiet determination touched Frank in a way he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way Diane's shoulders carried the weight of responsibility, or how Tommy stayed close without being told, sensing his mother's vigilance even at his young age. Frank positioned himself near the soup display where he could keep an eye on them while maintaining the pretense of work. In his experience, late-night grocery stores attracted all kinds of people. Most were harmless: nurses, security guards, insomniacs picking up forgotten necessities. But sometimes trouble walked through those doors looking for easy targets. The automatic doors chimed again to 12:23 a.m. Three men entered Palmer's family grocery with the swagger of people who believed they owned whatever space they occupied. The leader wore an expensive tracksuit that caught the fluorescent light, gold chains glinting against his chest. His two companions flanked him like backup dancers, smaller but mean-looking, scanning the store with predatory eyes. Frank recognized the type immediately. He continued organizing soup cans while tracking their movement through his peripheral vision. These weren't customers. They were making rounds. Rick Torino approached Morris at the register, his voice low and conversational, but Frank caught the underlying menace. Words like neighborhood security and protection fees drifted across the empty store. Morris's hands shook as he counted money from the register drawer, his face pale under the harsh lighting. "Come on, Morris," Rick said with false friendliness. "We've been through this. Business has been good, right? No break-ins, no trouble from street punks. That's because people know this place is under my protection." Morris nodded quickly, handing over a stack of 20s. "Yes, of course, Rick. Same as always." Frank's jaw tightened as he watched the exchange. This wasn't the first time. Morris's nervous energy around closing time suddenly made sense. The old man had been paying tribute, keeping his little grocery store safe through extortion disguised as neighborhood watch. Eddie Kowalski, the muscle of the group, noticed Diane selecting produce with Tommy. "Check out the pretty nurse," he said to his companion Joey, loud enough to be heard across the store. "Working late again, ain't she?" Joey Martino snickered. "Nice legs for a single mom. Bet she's lonely." Rick's attention shifted from Morris to Diane like a predator catching a new scent. He studied her with calculating eyes, noting the hospital scrubs, the careful way she shopped, the protective stance over her son. "Evening, Mrs. Mitchell," Rick said, approaching the produce section with that same false charm he'd used on Morris. "Working late again? That's dedication." Diane looked up, her brown eyes immediately wary. "Just picking up a few things." Of course, of course." Rick picked up an apple, polishing it on his tracksuit. "Beautiful kid you got there. Tommy, right? Smart boy. I see him walking to school sometimes on Maple Street." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Diane's hand found Tommy's shoulder, pulling him closer. "We should go. It's late." "Now don't be unfriendly," Rick continued, his smile never wavering. "See, I've been thinking about you, Mrs. Mitchell. Single mom, working all those double shifts. Must be tough making ends meet on a nurse's salary. Dangerous neighborhood, too. Lot of crime around here lately." Frank had heard enough. He set down his stocking cart and began moving closer, his soft-soled shoes silent on the linoleum. "Thing is," Rick continued, "I provide a service to this community. Protection, peace of mind. For a reasonable fee, let's say $200 a week. I make sure nothing bad happens to good people like you and Tommy here." "I can't afford that," Diane whispered, her voice tight with controlled fear that Rick's false friendliness evaporated. "Then maybe you shouldn't shop here anymore." "But your kids need groceries, don't they? Be a shame if something happened." Because Mommy was too proud to accept help. Joey and Eddie moved to block the aisle exits, their positioning casual but deliberate. Tommy pressed closer to his mother, sensing the danger even if he didn't understand it. Frank continued his approach, removing his thick glasses and folding them carefully. His movement caught Morris's attention from behind the register, and the old man's face went white as recognition dawned. "Please," Diane said, her voice trembling. "I'm just trying to shop for my son. We don't want any trouble." Rick laughed, the sound echoing off the empty shelves. "Trouble? Lady, I'm trying to prevent trouble. $200 a week, or you find somewhere else to buy your milk and eggs." "What's it gonna be?" Tommy whimpered as Rick reached toward him, and that sound cut through Frank like a blade. Some lines couldn't be crossed. Some things couldn't be tolerated. "Please, I'm just trying to shop for my son," Diane pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. We don't want any trouble. Rick's laugh was cold, calculated. Trouble? Lady, I'm trying to prevent trouble. He signaled to Joey and Eddie, who shifted, positioned to block both ends of the produce aisle. The tactical positioning wasn't lost on Frank. These men had done this before. Smart kids learn quick about respect, Rick said, reaching for Tommy's thin wrist. His grip tightened until the 8-year-old whimpered, tears forming in his bright eyes. That sound shattered something inside Frank. He set down his stocking cart with deliberate care and stepped forward, his voice quiet but carrying new authority. Excuse me, but I think the lady said no. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Gone was the shuffling store clerk with rounded shoulders and hesitant movements. Frank's posture straightened, his head came up, and something dangerous flickered in his dark eyes. The thick glasses were folded and tucked into his shirt pocket, revealing a face that suddenly seemed familiar in a way that made Rick's crew take an unconscious step backward. Old man, you best keep walking, Rick snarled, though his grip on Tommy's wrist loosened slightly. This ain't your business. Frank's response was measured, each word carefully chosen. I'm asking politely. Let the boy go. Eddie, the designated muscle, tried to reassert their dominance. You got a hearing problem. Pops, Rick told you to walk away. But something in Frank's stillness unnerved them. He didn't puff up or posture like most men facing 3 opponents. Instead, he stood perfectly balanced on the balls of his feet, hands loose at his sides, radiating a calm that was somehow more threatening than any aggressive display. Joey pulled out his phone, thumb poised over the screen. This old fool wants to play hero. Should I call for backup? Nah, Rick said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. We can handle one broken-down grocery clerk. From behind the register, Morris emerged with the cash drawer in his shaking hands. He took one clear look at Frank without the cap and glasses, and his face drained of all color. The drawer slipped from his fingers, coins scattering across the linoleum as he whispered something that sounded like, "Oh my God." The sound of rolling quarters and scattered bills broke the tension momentarily. All eyes turned toward Morris, who was staring at Frank with a mixture of disbelief and dawning recognition. Morris, Rick called. You know this guy? The old man's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. His hands trembled as he pointed at Frank, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Frank never took his eyes off Rick. Last chance, he said quietly. Let the boy go and walk away. Nobody has to get hurt. Rick's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. Being challenged in front of his crew, in front of the people he'd been terrorizing, was intolerable. He still held Tommy's wrist, but the boy had stopped crying and was looking up at Frank with curious wonder. You think you're some kind of tough guy? Rick snarled. You know who I am? Who I work for? I own this neighborhood, old man. I own this store. I own that register monkey. And I'm about to own you. Eddie and Joey closed in from both sides, sensing their leader needed backup to handle one middle-aged grocery clerk. The aisle felt smaller suddenly, cramped with violence about to explode, but Frank's slight smile was the most terrifying thing any of them had ever seen. Morris, he said without looking away from Rick, his voice carrying that distinctive lisp that made Morris's eyes widen even further. You might want to call the police. Tell them there's about to be a situation at Palmer's Family Grocery. The standoff stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Rick still gripped Tommy's wrist, though the boy had stopped struggling and was watching Frank with fascination. Diane pressed herself against the produce display, protecting her son as best she could while this strange confrontation played out around them. Morris finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a croak. Mike? Dear God in heaven. Mike Tyson. The name hung in the air like thunder before lightning, and everything changed. Frank reached up and removed his Yankees cap with slow deliberation, revealing the unmistakable dome and features that had graced magazine covers and championship belts around the world. The fluorescent lights caught the tribal tattoos etched into his face, no longer hidden by shadows and careful positioning. That's right, Mike Tyson said, his voice carrying the distinctive lisp that had become as famous as his devastating right hand. And I'm telling you one more time, let the boy go. The change in the store's atmosphere was electric. Rick's crew took another step back, their street swagger evaporating like morning mist. Even Tommy stopped whimpering, his 8-year-old eyes wide with wonder as he recognized the legendary figure from posters and video games. Diane's hand flew to her mouth, disbelief and hope warring in her expression. This couldn't be real. Mike Tyson stocking shelves at Palmer's Family Grocery? Working the night shift like any other employee? Rick, desperate to save face in front of his crew, forced out a nervous laugh. So what? Some washed-up boxer thinks he can intimidate us? That was 30 years ago, old man. You're just another has-been living in the past. Tyson's response was quietly philosophical, spoken with the wisdom of someone who'd walked through hell and emerged changed. I've been many things in my life. The bad guy, the monster, the villain. I've done things I'm not proud of. But if there's one thing my life taught me, it's that real strength protects the weak. Real power lifts people up, it doesn't tear them down. His dark eyes never left Rick's face as he continued. I grew up in neighborhoods like this. I know what it's like when people prey on families just trying to get by. I worked here because I believe in giving back to communities like the one that saved me when I was nobody. Morris had found his courage, stepping forward despite his shaking hands. Mike's been here 3 months. Best employee I ever had. Never missed a shift, never caused trouble. Just wanted to help people. That's touching. Rick sneered, though sweat beaded on his forehead. But this is business. My business. And you're interfering. Tommy looked up at the man who'd been terrorizing his mother and spoke with the fearless honesty of childhood. You're a bad man. Mr. Mike is good. The simple truth from an 8-year-old cut through all the posturing and false bravado. Rick's face darkened with rage as he realized he was losing control of the situation. His grip tightened on Tommy's wrist, making the boy cry out. That was his fatal mistake. You want to know who I used to be? Tyson asked, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. The youngest in history. I was the baddest man on the planet, and grown men refused to enter the ring with me. He took a single step forward, and Rick's entire crew flinched. But you know what I am now, Tyson continued, slipping into the classic peek-boo stance that had terrorized heavyweight divisions for decades. His hands came up, elbows tight, head moving in small circles as muscle memory took over. I'm someone who doesn't tolerate bullies threatening children. Rick, panicking now, pushed Tommy away from him but pulled a switchblade from his jacket pocket. The blade clicked open with metallic finality as he pointed it at Tyson's chest. I don't care who you used to be, old man, Rick said, his voice cracking slightly. This is my neighborhood now, and you just made a big mistake. Tyson's smile was slight, patient, and absolutely terrifying. It was the expression of a man who'd faced down the toughest heavyweights in the world and found them wanting. A man who'd been to prison, to the depths of personal hell, and climbed out stronger than before. Then school is in session, he said quietly, shifting his weight to the balls of his feet. The grocery store fell silent except for the buzzing fluorescent lights and the distant hum of refrigeration units. Rick held his knife like a lifeline. Eddie and Joey flanked him uncertainly, and Morris gripped the edge of his counter with white knuckles. But everyone's attention was focused on the former heavyweight champion of the world as he prepared to remind 3 small-time bullies why legends never truly fade. They were about to learn the hard way that some people should never be underestimated, and some lines should never be crossed. Rick lunged with the switchblade, desperation and rage, driving his clumsy attack. What followed was a masterclass in controlled violence that demonstrated why Mike Tyson had once been the most feared heavyweight in the world. Tyson slipped the knife, thrust by millimeters, his head movement so fluid it looked like he was dancing. The blade whistled past his ear as he came up from his crouch with a devastating left hook to Rick's liver. The body shot landed with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a side of beef. Rick's eyes rolled back as he crumpled to his knees, the knife clattering across the linoleum. The liver shot, Tyson's signature knockout punch, had shut down his entire nervous system in an instant. Eddie charged from behind, thinking he could overwhelm the older man with size and youth. Tyson pivoted without looking, his body moving with the same explosive speed that had made him famous. A right uppercut caught Eddie flush on the chin, lifting the 200-pound thug completely off his feet before depositing him unconscious. Among the scattered oranges, Joey tried to run, his survival instincts finally overriding his loyalty to Rick. But his expensive sneakers slipped on the quarters Morris had spilled, sending him tumbling into a display of soup cans. Tyson was on him before he could regain his feet, delivering a short right cross that switched off Joey's lights like a circuit breaker. The entire confrontation lasted 27 seconds. Tyson straightened slowly, his breathing barely elevated. Despite the explosive violence, he adjusted his store polo and looked down at Rick, who was gasping on the linoleum like a fish out of water. "Stay down," Tyson said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was medical advice that he turned immediately to Tommy, kneeling to the boy's level with the gentle movements of a grandfather. "You okay, champ? Did they hurt you?" Tommy shook his head, wide-eyed but unharmed. "Are you really Mike Tyson?" "Yeah, kid. I really am." Tyson's smile transformed his face completely, erasing any trace of the destroyer who'd just dismantled 3 grown men. "Nobody's going to hurt you or your mom anymore." Diane remained pressed against the produce display, her nursing training warring with shock. She'd seen violence in hospital emergency rooms, but nothing like the surgical precision she'd just witnessed. 3 dangerous men reduced to unconscious heaps in less than 30 seconds, and the man responsible was checking on her son with grandfatherly concern. "Ma'am," Tyson said, rising to face her. "I'm sorry you had to see that. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you." Morris had already dialed 911, his voice shaking as he described the situation to the dispatcher. "Yes, there was an altercation. 3 men with weapons. No, the threat has been neutralized. You'll want to send Sergeant Santos if she's available. She knows the situation with these guys." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached Palmer's family grocery. Red and blue lights began washing through the front windows, painting the store in alternating colors of authority and justice. Rick groaned and tried to sit up, but his body wasn't cooperating. The liver shot had scrambled his nervous system, leaving him helpless as a newborn. Eddie remained motionless among the oranges, breathing steadily but completely unconscious. Joey had managed to open his eyes but couldn't seem to remember where he was or how he'd gotten there. Tyson picked up Rick's switchblade, closing it carefully and placing it on the checkout counter for the police. Evidence. He'd learned long ago that the legal system worked better when you gave it clear, undeniable facts. "The cameras got everything," Morris said, pointing to the security system above the register. "Self-defense, clear as day." Tommy tugged on Tyson's polo shirt. "Mr. Mike? Will you be here tomorrow night?" Tyson looked at Diane, his expression questioning. She nodded through her tears, unable to form words around her gratitude and relief. "If your mom doesn't mind me being around," he answered. The first police car pulled into the parking lot. Sergeant Maria Santos entered Palmer's family grocery with 2 patrol officers, her professional composure intact despite the chaos. She surveyed the scene with experienced eyes. 3 unconscious suspects, security cameras recording everything, and Mike Tyson calmly explaining the situation to her officers. Santos had been working Queens for 15 years. She'd heard the rumors about the former champion working odd jobs around the city, trying to give back after his troubled past. Seeing him in person, she was struck by how different he seemed from the wild young fighter she remembered from old news footage. "Mr. Tyson," she said, approaching with respectful authority. "I'm Sergeant Santos. Can you walk me through what happened?" 3 men came in demanding protection money from Mrs. Mitchell here, Tyson explained, his voice calm and factual. "When she couldn't pay, they threatened her son. The leader grabbed the boy's wrist hard enough to hurt him, then pulled a knife when I asked them to stop." Santos examined the switchblade on the counter, then looked at the security camera position to capture the entire confrontation. "Morris, I'll need copies of that footage." "Already burning the DVD," Morris replied, his hands steadier now that professional help had arrived. "Shows everything from when they walked in." The paramedics arrived as Rick and his crew were regaining consciousness. Eddie tried to mouth off to the officers until he saw Tyson standing nearby, then suddenly decided cooperation was his best option. "Sergeant," one of the patrol officers called. "We've got warrants on all 3. Rick Torino's got outstanding assault charges, and the other 2 have drug possession beefs." Santos nodded. She'd been building cases against these particular troublemakers for months. "Self-defense is clear from what I can see. Mr. Tyson, you're free to go." but I'll need your contact information for the report. I'll be here tomorrow night, Tyson said. Same as always. Word traveled through the neighborhood faster than police radio chatter. By dawn, Palmer's Family Grocery had a steady stream of customers who'd never shopped there before. They came to buy milk and bread, but really they came to see Iron Mike Tyson stocking shelves and helping elderly customers reach high items. Tyson was gracious but uncomfortable with the attention. He signed autographs for children and answered questions about his boxing career, but deflected praise for the previous night's events. I'm just a guy trying to do his job, he told the small crowd. This is a good neighborhood with good people. Sometimes good people need to stand together. A local news crew arrived around 8 a.m., but Tyson politely declined interviews. The cameras in the store caught everything that matters, he said. 3 bullies learned that actions have consequences. That's the whole story. Mrs. Patterson arrived for her weekly shopping, completely unaware of the previous night's drama until she saw the crowd. When Morris explained what had happened, she marched straight to Tyson and hugged his massive arm. I knew you were special, dear, she said. Didn't know how special, but I knew. As the morning wore on and the crowd thinned, Diane approached Tyson near the checkout counter. Tommy clung to her hand, drawing pictures on a small pad she'd brought from home. Why? She asked quietly. Why were you working here? You could be anywhere, doing anything. Tyson considered the question, watching Tommy add stick figures to his drawing. I grew up in neighborhoods like this. I know how important places like Morris's store are to families trying to get by. I wanted to give back without making it about me. Guess that plan didn't work out too well. Tommy held up his drawing, stick figures of a woman, a boy, and a very large man standing between them and some scary-looking monsters. That's us, Tommy explained proudly. Mr. Mike protecting me and Mommy from the bad men. Tyson studied the crayon artwork with the seriousness it deserved. That's a good drawing, champ. You got my good side. The store closed at 6 a.m. later than usual due to all the excitement. Morris locked up while Tyson walked Diane and Tommy to their car in the morning sunlight. Will you really be here tomorrow? Tommy asked. If your mom doesn't mind me being around, Tyson repeated, looking at Diane. Mine. She wiped away fresh tears. Mike, you saved our lives. We'll never forget what you did. Tyson watched their aging Honda disappear into the morning traffic, unaware that this was only the beginning of something much larger and more dangerous than 3 small-time bullies with big mouths and bigger attitudes. 1 week later, Palmer's Family Grocery had transformed into something Morris never could have imagined. The small cafe tables he'd installed near the front windows were occupied every afternoon by neighborhood children doing homework while waiting for their parents to finish work. Mike Tyson moved among them like a gentle giant, helping with math problems and offering encouragement with reading assignments. His presence had turned the grocery store into an unofficial community center where parents felt safe leaving their kids for an hour or two. Mr. Mike, I don't understand this fraction problem, complained Lisa Chun, 9, holding up her worksheet with frustration. Tyson sat down in the child-sized chair across from her, his massive frame looking comical, but his attention completely focused. Fractions are like boxing rounds, Lisa. You got 12 rounds in a fight, right? If you fight 4 rounds, that's 4 out of 12. 4 twelfths. Makes sense. Lisa's face lit up with understanding. Oh, so if I eat 3 pieces of pizza out of 8, that's 3/8. Exactly. You're getting it. Diane arrived for her regular Tuesday night shopping, no longer looking over her shoulder or counting exits. Tommy ran to greet Tyson with a hug around his legs, clutching a rolled-up paper in his small fist. Mr. Mike, look what I drew. Tommy unrolled his latest artwork, a more sophisticated version of his stick figure heroes, showing Tyson teaching a group of children while their parents shopped safely in the background. That's beautiful, champ. You're getting better every week. The neighborhood felt different now. Other business owners reported that local troublemakers had been avoiding the area entirely. Mrs. Rodriguez from the family market down the street had stopped by earlier to thank Tyson personally. For the first time in months, she was keeping her store open past 9 p.m. Carlos Rodriguez, her son, had started bringing his teenage friends by the grocery store just to be around Tyson. They weren't looking for trouble. They were looking for guidance from someone who commanded respect without demanding it. Mr. Tyson, Carlos asked during one afternoon visit. My friend Miguel wants to start boxing. You think that's a good idea? Boxing's not about fighting, Carlos. It's about discipline, respect, learning to control your emotions when pressure gets high. Miguel willing to work hard. Yes, sir. He wants to stay out of trouble. Then boxing might be perfect for him. I'll talk to Morris about setting up some equipment in the basement. Nothing fancy, but enough to teach the basics. Morris overheard the conversation and nodded enthusiastically. The increased foot traffic had boosted his sales significantly, but more importantly, he felt proud of what his little store was becoming. Tommy spent most evenings at the grocery store now, either doing homework at the cafe tables or helping Tyson with simple tasks like organizing the magazine rack. The 8-year-old had developed a confident swagger that came from knowing someone powerful cared about him. Mom, Tommy said one evening as they walked to their car, Mr. Mike says I'm getting stronger. Stronger how, honey? Inside stronger. He says that's the most important kind. Diane watched her son skip ahead to their Honda, marveling at the transformation. A week ago, Tommy had been quiet and fearful, always staying pressed against her side in public. Now he walked with his shoulders back, making eye contact with adults, even helping other children with their homework. The change in herself was equally dramatic. For the first time since Tommy was born, she felt genuinely safe in her own neighborhood. She no longer jumped at every sound or analyzed every stranger as a potential threat. Tuesday night settled into its comfortable routine. Tyson worked his shift, helping customers and restocking shelves while Tommy sat at his cafe table drawing pictures and finishing math worksheets. Diane shopped without fear, actually taking time to compare prices instead of grabbing necessities and rushing home. But as 11:30 p.m. approached, exactly 1 week since the confrontation with Rick's crew, Morris's comfortable expression shifted to one of growing anxiety. He kept checking his watch and glancing toward the front windows. Morris, you okay? Tyson asked, noting the older man's nervous energy. Probably nothing, Morris replied, but his hands were starting to shake. It's just, Rick was small-time, Mike. Street-level muscle. I keep thinking about who he might have worked for. As if summoned by his words, an expensive black sedan pulled into the parking lot. The car was pristine, its windows tinted dark enough to hide the occupants. It sat idling under the streetlights like a predator deciding whether to strike. Morris went pale. Oh no, not him. Mike, we need to talk. Right now. Tyson looked through the front window at the sedan, then at Tommy happily coloring at his table. What aren't you telling me, Morris? Rick was nobody, Morris whispered, grabbing Tyson's arm with surprising strength. But the man getting out of that car, that's Vincent Marchetti. And Vinny owns half this neighborhood. Morris pulled Tyson into the break room with shaking hands, locking the door behind them. Through the small window, they could see the black sedan's occupants emerging. 3 men in expensive suits moving with the confident precision of professionals. Mike, listen to me, Morris whispered urgently. Rick Torino was just street muscle, a nobody collecting pocket change. But Vincent Marchetti, he's connected. Real connected. He runs protection for 40 businesses in Queens, and he's got judges and cops on his payroll. Tyson studied Morris's terrified expression. How do you know so much about his operation? Morris collapsed into a folding chair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. Because I used to work for his father. 25 years ago, I was Morris Kellerman, keeping books for the Marchetti family. When I tried to go straight, they threatened my wife, my kids. I had to disappear, become someone else. The revelation hit Tyson like a physical blow. Morris, quiet, gentle Morris who worried about his customers and treated everyone like family, had been running from organized crime for decades. My real name is Morris Kellerman, the old man continued. I changed it when I moved to Queens, bought this store with money I'd saved from my old life. Figured if I kept my head down, stayed small, they'd forget about me. Through the break room window, they could see Vincent Marchetti entering the store. He was younger than Tyson expected, maybe 45, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from never hearing the word no. His 2 companions flanked him professionally, not the sloppy street thugs Rick had brought, but experienced soldiers who knew their business. He's not like Rick, Morris said, watching Marchetti browse the magazine rack with casual interest. Vinny doesn't scream or threaten. He's polite, educated, treats everything like a business transaction. But families who cross him just disappear. Not killed, disappeared. New identities in other cities, if they're lucky. Tyson cracked the break room door slightly, studying Marchetti through the gap. The man carried himself like a successful businessman, which technically he was. His legitimate trucking company provided cover for an operation that had perfected the art of neighborhood control through psychological pressure. Mr. Tyson. Marchetti's voice carried clearly across the store, cultured and pleasant. Would you mind joining me? I'd like to have a brief conversation. There was no choice. Tyson emerged from the break room, Morris trailing behind like a condemned man walking to execution. Vincent Marchetti. The man introduced himself with a firm handshake. I believe you've already met some of my associates. Unfortunately, they lack professionalism in their approach. Up close, Marchetti was even more intimidating than at a distance. Not physically. Tyson could break him in half without effort, but in the way he owned whatever space he occupied. This was a man accustomed to having his words treated as law. Mr. Tyson, I want you to know I respect what you've accomplished. Marchetti continued, selecting a candy bar from the display with deliberate casualness. Your career, your transformation, your desire to give back to the community. It's admirable. Tommy looked up from his coloring book, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Tyson positioned himself between the boy and Marchetti without making it obvious. However, Marchetti's tone remained conversational. You've interfered with my business operations. Rick and his crew may have been crude, but they were my employees. Their methods were unrefined, but their purpose was legitimate. He approached the register where Morris waited with hands that trembled visibly. Hello, Morris. Or should I say, Morris Kellerman? You've been hiding from us for a long time. Morris couldn't speak, could barely breathe. 25 years of carefully constructed identity were crumbling in real time. But I'm not here about ancient history. Marchetti continued, placing exact change for his candy bar on the counter. I'm here about the future. Specifically, the next 48 hours. Tyson felt ice forming in his veins as Marchetti turned to face him directly. Mr. Tyson, I'm offering you 48 hours to leave this neighborhood permanently. Collect your belongings, say your goodbyes, and find somewhere else to practice your community service. If you're still here Friday night at midnight. He let the sentence hang in the air like smoke. Mrs. Mitchell and her son will disappear. Not hurt, disappeared. They'll wake up Saturday morning in a different city with new names and new lives, and you'll never see them again. Do we understand each other? The threat was delivered with the same pleasant tone Marchetti might use to order coffee. No raised voice, no dramatic gestures, just the quiet certainty of a man who'd never failed to deliver on his promises. Tommy continued coloring, blissfully unaware that his entire world had just been placed in jeopardy. I understand you perfectly, Tyson replied, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. Excellent. Marchetti pocketed his change and headed for the door, his bodyguards falling into step beside him. 48 hours, Mr. Tyson. I hope you'll make the right choice. He paused at the exit, looking back with that same pleasant smile. Oh, and Morris? Welcome back to the family business. We'll be in touch soon. The black sedan disappeared into the night, leaving behind the suffocating silence of a chess game, where all the pieces had suddenly changed color. Tommy held up his latest drawing, stick figures of Mike Tyson protecting a woman and child from monsters that looked suspiciously like men in expensive suits. Mr. Mike, do you like my picture? Tyson stared at the innocent artwork, realizing that everything he thought he'd accomplished was just the opening move in a much larger, deadlier game at 2:47 a.m. Mike Tyson sat alone in Palmer's break room, staring at Tommy's innocent drawing under the harsh fluorescent light. The crayon artwork showed him as a protector, but Vinny's threat echoed in his mind like a death knell. 48 hours to abandon everything he'd built, or watch an innocent family disappear forever. He pulled out his old flip phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. After 4 rings, a gravelly voice answered with the irritation of a man awakened too early. This better be good, growled Kevin Rooney, Tyson's former trainer and one of the few people who'd stood by him through his darkest years. Kevin, it's Mike. I need information about someone named Vincent Marchetti. The line went quiet for a long moment. When Rooney spoke again, his voice carried 30 years of street wisdom. Jesus, Mike. What did you get yourself into? Marchetti's. Connected but not made. Operates in the gray areas where organized crime meets legitimate business. Smart, patient, and he's never been successfully prosecuted because witnesses change their stories or just plain vanish. He threatened a family under my protection. Mike, listen to me. This ain't boxing. There's no referees, no rules, and these people don't fight fair. They'll use everything you care about against you. After ending the call, Tyson found Morris restocking shelves with shaking hands. The revelation about his past had aged the old man 10 years in one night. How far does Vinny's operation extend? Tyson asked. Morris set down a box of cereal, his movements mechanical. Rodriguez Family Market, Chin's Laundromat, Salvatore's Pizza, Henderson's Hardware. 8 other businesses that I know of. All paying tribute, all living in fear. Some have been trapped for years. The scope was staggering. Vinny hadn't just built a protection racket. He'd created a shadow government that controlled an entire neighborhood through systematic intimidation. 6 a.m., Tyson waited in the Queens General Hospital parking lot as Diane's shift ended. She emerged through the employee entrance looking exhausted, her nurse's training keeping her alert despite the double shift. When she saw him leaning against the Honda's hood, relief and fear warred in her expression. Mike, what are you doing? Here, we need to talk about Vincent Marchetti. The name hit her like a physical blow. She glanced around the parking lot nervously, keys trembling in her hand. You know about Vinny? He visited the store last night. Made threats. Diane's face crumpled. I've heard whispers at the hospital. Families that crossed him and just disappeared. Not killed, relocated. New identities in different cities where they'll never feel safe again. She grabbed his arm desperately. Mike, please. Just leave. Tommy and I will be okay. We'll move, start over somewhere else. Running won't save you. Tyson said gently. He knows where you work, where Tommy goes to school. The only way to end this is to end his operation completely. They walked toward the hospital entrance, Diane's nursing badge swaying with each nervous step. As they reached the doors, a hospital security guard approached with a friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. Working late again, Mrs. Mitchell. Officer James Carroll, 55, wore the uniform well, but something about his manner set Tyson's nerves on edge. Hope you're being careful. Dangerous neighborhood these days. The message was clear. Vinny could reach her anywhere, anytime. Even here, at her workplace, surrounded by colleagues and security cameras. After Carol walked away, Diane leaned against the brick wall, her composure finally cracking. He's everywhere, Mike. His people, his influence. How do you fight something like that? Tyson watched Carol disappear around the corner, memorizing the man's face and badge number. One piece at a time. The 114th precinct buzzed with morning activity as detectives processed overnight arrests and patrol officers filed reports. Sergeant Maria Santos sat in her cramped office, surrounded by case files and photographs documenting 2 years of patient investigation into Vincent Marchetti's operation. She looked up as Mike Tyson filled her doorway, his presence commanding immediate attention from every cop in the squad room. Mr. Tyson, I was wondering when you'd show up. Santos closed her office door and gestured to a chair that looked comically small beside Tyson's frame. Her desk held neat stacks of surveillance photos, financial records, and victim statements, evidence of systematic criminal enterprise operating under law enforcement's nose. I've been building a case against Marchetti for 2 years, she explained, spreading photographs across her desk. But witnesses disappear, evidence gets lost, and cases fall apart in court. 3 patrol officers and 1 detective are on his payroll, maybe more. Tyson studied the photos, businesses he recognized, faces he'd seen around the neighborhood, the intricate web of corruption that protected Vinny's operation. Why are you clean? He asked directly. Santos's expression hardened. Personal reasons. My younger brother Miguel was 19 when Vinny's people approached him about selling drugs at Queens Community College. Good kid, full scholarship, wanted to be a teacher. She pulled out a hospital photo that made Tyson's jaw tighten. A young man in a wheelchair, his face bearing the marks of a savage beating. When Miguel refused, they made an example of him. Fractured skull, broken spine, permanent paralysis. The investigating officers, all dirty, ruled it a random mugging despite witness testimony. The pain in her voice was raw, immediate. Santos had joined the force to protect people like her. Brother, only to discover the system itself was compromised. I became a cop to fight people like Marchetti, she continued. But every case I build gets sabotaged from within. Until now, I've been fighting alone. Tyson leaned forward, his voice carrying quiet intensity. What do you need? Intelligence. Evidence. Someone Marchetti can't buy or intimidate. Santos pulled out a detailed map of the neighborhood, marking businesses and safe houses with colored pins. His operation runs like clockwork. Collection routes, protection schedules, communication, networks. If we can disrupt enough pieces simultaneously. They spent the next hour mapping Vinny's empire. 43 businesses paying tribute, 17 street-level enforcers, multiple safe houses, and a network of corrupt officials providing legal protection. It was more sophisticated than either had imagined. The beauty of his system, Santos explained, is that it's mostly psychological. Most businesses pay willingly because resistance seems hopeless. Break that perception, and the whole thing could collapse. Her radio crackled with an urgent dispatch. All units, silent alarm at Palmer's Family Grocery, possible break-in in progress. Santos and Tyson exchanged grim looks as they rushed to her patrol car. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. They arrived at the grocery store to find Morris standing in the wreckage of his life's work. Shelves had been overturned, merchandise scattered across the floor, but nothing appeared stolen. This wasn't robbery. It was a message spray-painted across the back wall in blood-red letters. 36 hours left. Morris sat on an overturned milk crate, looking older and more fragile than ever. They came through the back door around 4 a.m. Took maybe 10 minutes to do all this, then disappeared. Santos photographed the scene while Tyson helped Morris begin the cleanup. The psychological warfare was working exactly as Vinny intended, applying pressure without crossing lines that would bring federal attention. Mike, Santos said quietly as they worked. This escalation pattern, he's not bluffing. When that countdown hits 0, he'll move against the family. Tyson righted a display of canned goods, his movements methodical despite the rage building inside him. Then we make our move first. Against his entire operation? With what resources? Sometimes, Tyson said, remembering lessons learned in 100 boxing rings. You don't need an army. You just need to hit the right target at the right time. Santos looked at him skeptically, but something in his quiet confidence reminded her why Mike Tyson had once been the most feared man in boxing. The clock was ticking, and Vinny Marchetti was about to learn that some legends don't fade quietly. Into the night. That evening, Tyson began converting Palmer's basement storage area into a makeshift gym. Morris helped despite his exhaustion, both men working in determined silence as they cleared space between the industrial shelving and water heaters. Old boxing posters went up on the concrete walls, images of Tyson in his prime, reminders of what he was capable of when properly motivated. A heavy bag appeared, borrowed from a friend who ran a legitimate gym in Brooklyn. Speed bag, jump ropes, and basic equipment followed. Haven't seen you train this seriously in years, Morris observed, watching Tyson wrap his hands with practiced efficiency. Haven't had a reason like this in years. The training wasn't just physical preparation. It was psychological warfare turned inward. Every punch into the heavy bag carried the weight of Tommy's frightened whimper. Every combination sequence echoed with Diane's desperate pleas for him to leave. Tyson was reminding his body and mind what they were capable of when innocent lives hung in the balance. Word spread through the neighborhood faster than gossip at a church social. By 4 p.m., a dozen children pressed their faces against the basement windows, watching Iron Mike Tyson prepare for war. Mr. Mike's training, Tommy announced to anyone within earshot. He's getting ready to protect us. The children's enthusiasm was infectious. Soon parents were bringing folding chairs, turning the basement into an impromptu community center where kids did homework while watching a legend prepare for battle. Lisa, your algebra homework isn't going to finish itself, Tyson called between rounds, sweat dripping from his face as he worked the speed bag with rhythmic precision. But Mr. Mike, this is better than homework. Education first, entertainment second. Always. Carlos Rodriguez and his teenage friends arrived after school, their usual swagger replaced by respectful attention. They'd never seen anyone move like Tyson moved. Explosiveness contained within perfect technique, power generated from footwork and body mechanics they were only beginning to understand. "Mr. Tyson," Carlos asked during a break, "you really think you can stop Vinny's whole operation by yourself?" Tyson toweled sweat from his face, considering the question seriously. "In boxing, Carlos, you don't beat the other fighter. You beat their plan, their rhythm, their confidence. Marchetti's got a system that works because nobody's challenged it properly. Challenge the system, and everything else falls apart." Tommy became Tyson's unofficial training partner, holding the timer during 3-minute rounds and fetching water bottles with the seriousness of a professional cornerman. Between exercises, Tyson taught basic self-defense to the gathered children, not fighting techniques, but awareness, escape routes, and when to run versus when to stand firm. "Courage isn't not being afraid, champ," he told Tommy during one lesson. "Courage is being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Like when you stood up to those bad men." Exactly like that. The training session was interrupted by the slam of car doors in the parking lot above. Through the basement windows, they could see expensive shoes and suit pants. Vinny's people conducting surveillance, making their presence known. Tyson continued his workout without acknowledging the watchers, but his intensity increased noticeably. Each punch carried more violence. Each combination flowed with more lethal purpose. The message was clear: let them watch. Let them report back to Vinny about what they'd seen. To by 7 p.m., the impromptu audience began dispersing as parents called children home for dinner. Tommy lingered longer than the others, reluctant to leave his hero's side. "Tommy, go help your mom with shopping," Tyson said gently. "I'll be here when you get back." The boy nodded and scampered up the basement stairs, his footsteps echoing off concrete walls covered with images of boxing greatness. At 8:30 p.m., Diane's Honda pulled into the parking lot. She emerged looking haggard, her usual composure cracking. Under accumulated stress, Tommy ran to meet her, chattering excitedly about Tyson's training session, but she barely heard him eyeing her shaking hands. She carried a cardboard box that reeked of death. "Mike," she called down the basement stairs, her voice barely controlled. "We need to talk." Tyson climbed to the main floor, taking in Diane's pale complexion and Tommy's confused expression. "Someone left this on our doorstep," she whispered, showing him the box's contents. A dead rat surrounded by crumpled $20 bills and a handwritten note. 24 hours. The psychological pressure was escalating exactly as Vinny had planned, but he'd made one crucial miscalculation. The more desperate Diane became, the more determined Tyson grew to end this permanently. The countdown was accelerating, and it was time to take the fight to the enemy. With less than 24 hours remaining in Vinny's ultimatum, Mike Tyson left Palmer's family grocery at dawn, moving through the Queens streets like a shadow with purpose. He wore dark clothes and soft-soled shoes, his training from the previous night having sharpened reflexes that had never completely dulled. His first target was Angelo's auto shop, where Sergeant Santos's intelligence indicated 3 of Vinny's enforcers collected tribute every Thursday morning. The shop sat on a corner lot surrounded by chain-link fencing, its bays filled with half-repaired vehicles and the kind of mechanical chaos that provided perfect cover for criminal meetings. Tyson positioned himself across the street, watching as Angelo Petrosino, 67, opened his garage doors with the resigned movements of a man who'd lost the fight years ago. The elderly mechanic had run his shop for 40 years, building transmissions and raising 5 children on honest work until Vinny's protection racket consumed most of his profit. At 8:15 a.m., a silver BMW pulled into the shop's lot. Bruce Falcone, 32, and Tommy Greco, 29, emerged with the casual arrogance of men collecting easy money. They wore expensive tracksuits and gold jewelry, their movements broadcasting entitlement and casual violence. Tyson waited until they'd cornered Angelo in his office before making his approach. The confrontation was already underway, Falcone counting money while Greco reminded Angelo about rising security costs and neighborhood protection fees. "Morning, gentlemen," Tyson announced himself from the garage's entrance, his voice carrying across the cluttered workspace. Both enforcers spun around, recognition dawning slowly on their faces. They'd heard about Rick's fate, but seeing iron Mike Tyson in person was different, more imposing, more immediately dangerous than stories suggested. "This ain't your business, old man," Falcone snarled, though his voice lacked conviction. Walk away while you still can. Angelo's a good man, Tyson replied, stepping into the garage's shadows. Good men shouldn't have to pay tribute to scumbags. Greco reached inside his tracksuit, probably for a weapon, but Tyson was already moving. The speed that had made him legendary hadn't faded. It had simply been dormant, waiting for the right motivation. The first combination, left hook to the body, right cross to the chin, dropped Falcone like his legs had been cut off. Greco managed to produce a telescoping baton before a thunderous uppercut lifted him off his feet and deposited him unconscious among Angelo's tire collection. The entire confrontation lasted 18 seconds. Angelo emerged from his office, wide-eyed with disbelief. Mr. Tyson, they'll be back. With more people. No, they won't. Tyson retrieved Greco's baton and Falcone's wallet, memorizing addresses and phone numbers. This stops today, Angelo. For all of us. He spent the next 6 hours systematically dismantling Vinny's street-level operation. Each confrontation served dual purposes, gathering intelligence about the organization's structure while demonstrating that Marchetti's enforcers were far from invincible at T-Chin's laundromat, too. More enforcers learned why heavyweight champions study leverage and body mechanics. At Rodriguez Family Market, Tyson's peekaboo defense made 3 armed thugs look like amateur hour at the local GYM.by evening. Word had spread through Vinny's network like a virus. 6 street-level enforcers were in emergency rooms, 2 more had quit their jobs, and the remainder were avoiding their collection routes entirely. Tyson's phone buzzed with a call from Sergeant Santos. Her voice carried excitement he hadn't heard since their first meeting. Mike, something's happening. We've had 4 business owners come forward today willing to testify against Marchetti. They think you've broken his power. Power was never broken, Tyson replied, watching the sun set over Queens from Palmer's rooftop. Just proved it was never as strong as everyone believed. The Patterson woman from your grocery store called my precinct. Says she's tired of living in fear and wants to tell us everything she's seen over the past 3 years. More calls came in rapid succession. Business owners who'd paid tribute for years were suddenly finding courage they'd forgotten they possessed. The psychological foundation of Vinny's empire, the belief that resistance was hopeless, was cracking under the weight of demonstrated truth. Santos, Tyson said, ending his 4th call of the evening. How quickly can you move once you have enough testimony? If I can get clean arrests with federal oversight, maybe 48 hours to roll up his entire operation. Tyson looked down at Palmer's Family Grocery, where lights blazed in the basement gym and children's laughter drifted through the evening air. Tommy sat at his usual cafe table, working on homework while his mother shopped without fear for the first time in months. Then we finish this tomorrow night, he said, one way or another. Victory felt closer than it had since Vinny's ultimatum, but Tyson knew better than to celebrate prematurely. In boxing and in war, the most dangerous opponent was one who'd been backed into a corner with nothing left to lose. The countdown continued, and Vincent Marchetti was about to discover just how much damage one determined legend could inflict. When properly motivated, Friday morning arrived gray and cold, but Palmer's Family Grocery buzzed with celebration. Morris had hung a hand-painted banner across the front windows. Welcome back to our neighborhood. The deadline had passed. Vinny's ultimatum expired at midnight, and nothing had happened. Customers streamed through the doors with genuine smiles for the first time in years. Children played on the sidewalk while their parents shopped without constantly checking over their shoulders. The fear that had gripped the community like a strangling vine was finally loosening its hold. Mike, you did it, Morris said, his voice thick with emotion as he watched families moving freely through his store. 3 years I've been paying that bastard, and you ended it in less than a week. Tyson remained cautious despite the celebration around him. He'd studied too many opponents who seemed defeated only to rally with devastating counterattacks. But seeing Tommy's uninhibited laughter as he played with other children made him want to believe that maybe, just maybe, it really was over. Mr. Mike, Tommy called from his cafe table, where he was showing his latest drawing to a group of fascinated adults. Look, I drew you teaching everyone to be brave. The artwork showed stick figures of various sizes surrounding a large central figure, clearly Tyson, with their arms raised in victory poses. Around the edges, smaller figures that looked suspiciously like defeated bullies crawled away into the margins. That's beautiful, champ. You captured everyone's good side. By noon, the story had spread beyond the immediate neighborhood. Local business owners who'd never set foot in Palmer's arrived to meet the man who'd liberated their community. Carlos Rodriguez brought his father, who clasped Tyson's hand with tears in his eyes. My family came here from El Salvador 30 years ago, the older Rodriguez said in accented English. We built our market with honest work, but for 3 years we gave half our profits to that criminal. Today, for the first time, every dollar we earn stays in our family. Similar stories poured in throughout the day. The dry cleaner, the pizza shop, the hardware store, all reporting that Vinny's enforcers had simply vanished, leaving behind businesses free to operate without criminal taxation. Sergeant Santos called with the best news yet. Mike, we've got 12 business owners ready to testify, plus 4 of Marchetti's former enforcers who want to make deals. The federal prosecutors are interested. We might actually be able to put him away for 20 years. Local news crews arrived in the afternoon, but Tyson politely declined interviews. The cameras in Palmer's store caught everything that mattered last week, he told them. 3 bullies learned that actions have consequences. That's the whole story. Instead, he spent the day doing what had brought him here in the first place, helping customers, stocking shelves, and teaching neighborhood kids that real strength protected rather than intimidated. The basement gym was packed with teenagers learning proper punching technique while their parents discussed forming a permanent community watch program. Mrs. Patterson arrived for her weekly shopping, completely unaware of the previous night's tension until she saw the celebration. When Morris explained Vinny's ultimatum and its peaceful resolution, she marched straight to Tyson and hugged his massive arm. I knew you were special, dear. Never knew exactly how special, but a woman my age develops instincts about these things. As evening approached, Diane finished her hospital shift and arrived to find Tommy surrounded by other children, all of them drawing pictures inspired by their neighborhood hero. The boy who'd once clung to his mother's side in frightened silence was now confidently teaching younger kids how to draw proper stick figure boxing stances. Mike, Diane said quietly, watching her son's transformation with wonder, I don't know how to thank you. Not just for protecting us, but for showing Tommy what real courage looks like. Kids got natural courage, Tyson replied, observing Tommy patiently help a 5-year-old girl with her crayon technique. Just needed to see it was safe to let it show. The celebration continued into the evening, but Tyson couldn't completely shake his vigilance. Victory felt too clean, too complete. In his experience, dangerous opponents didn't surrender. They regrouped and struck from unexpected angles. But watching Tommy laugh with genuine joy while Diane shopped without fear made him want to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, good really could triumph over evil through simple courage and determination. The community had reclaimed its streets, and Mike Tyson had found something he hadn't known he was looking for, a place where his past could serve his present, and his strength could build rather than destroy. Saturday afternoon brought the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Queens feel like a small town instead of part of the world's largest city. Mike Tyson strolled through Palmer's family grocery. With Tommy at his side, the 8-year-old chattering excitedly about his plans for a neighborhood boxing club. And we can have real gloves, Mr. Mike? The kind champions wear. We'll start with training gloves, champ. Got to learn the basics before you worry about looking like a champion. The shopping trip had become a weekly tradition, Tyson teaching Tommy about nutrition, responsibility, and the importance of treating everyone with respect. Today felt particularly relaxed. The shadow of Vinny's threat finally lifted from their shoulders. Mrs. Rodriguez said her grandson wants to learn boxing too. Tommy continued, selecting apples with the serious concentration Tyson had taught him. Can girls learn boxing? Lisa Chen asked, and I didn't know what to tell her. Some of the best fighters I know are women, Tyson replied. Boxing's about discipline and respect, not about being tough. Anyone can learn if they're willing to work hard. They moved through the store's familiar aisles, Tyson helping elderly customers reach high shelves while Tommy distributed the hand-drawn boxing tips he'd been creating all week. The boy's confidence had grown exponentially. He made eye contact with adults, offered help without being asked, and carried himself with the quiet assurance of someone who knew powerful people cared about him. Mr. Mike, After we're done shopping, can we work on my footwork? Mom said she'll pick me up at 6, so we got time. Always got time for training, champ. But homework comes first, remember? They approached the checkout counter where Morris waited with his usual grandfatherly smile. The past week had transformed the old man as much as anyone. His nervous energy replaced by genuine contentment as he watched his store become the community center he'd always dreamed it could be. The usual supplies for the basement gym? Morris asked, noting the protein bars and bottled water in their cart. Tommy thinks we need better equipment, Tyson said with mock seriousness. Apparently stick figure drawings aren't sufficient training aids. Tommy giggled at the gentle teasing, completely at ease in a way that would have been impossible just weeks ago. They completed their transaction and headed for the parking lot, Tommy skipping ahead, while Tyson carried their purchases. 4 police cars surrounded them the moment they stepped outside. Detective Frank Morrison, 48, approached with an arrest warrant and the kind of satisfied smirk that set Tyson's teeth on edge. Morrison was everything wrong with law enforcement: corrupt, lazy, and cruel to anyone who couldn't fight back through the system's bureaucratic maze. Michael Tyson, you're under arrest for assault and battery in connection with multiple incidents over the past week. Tommy froze, confusion replacing his usual excitement. Mr. Mike? What's happening? Tyson remained calm despite the rage building in his chest. The charges were fabricated but technically plausible. He had indeed confronted Vinny's enforcers, and corrupt cops could twist self-defense into aggravated assault if they controlled the narrative. Tommy, listen to me carefully, Tyson said, as Morrison produced handcuffs. Go inside and find your mom. Call Sergeant Santos right away. Tell her exactly what you saw here. But Mr. Mike, no arguments, champ. This is important. Stay close to your mom and don't go anywhere alone. Morrison's smile widened as he cuffed Tyson's hands behind his back. Don't worry about the kid, Mike. I'm sure someone will keep an eye on him. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Even as they were arresting Tyson on trumped-up charges, Vinny's people were moving to their next phase of operation. Customers from Palmer's gathered in the parking lot, their celebration turning to confusion and anger as they watched their protector being taken away. Morris rushed outside, his face pale with the return of familiar terror. This is wrong, he shouted at the corrupt cops. Mike Tyson's a hero. He saved this neighborhood. Heroes don't assault innocent people, Morrison replied with mock sadness. Maybe you folks chose the wrong champion. As Tyson was loaded into the patrol car, he caught sight of Tommy standing in the store's doorway, tears streaming down his face, but trying to be brave like his hero had taught him. The boy raised his small hand in a goodbye wave that broke Tyson's heart. Through the rear window of the police car, Tyson watched a black van pull up near Palmer's Family Grocery. 2 men in casual clothes emerged, their movement professional and purposeful as they scanned the crowd of confused onlookers. Tommy was still visible in the doorway, alone and vulnerable, while Morris tried to disperse the crowd and restore order. Tyson pounded on the patrol car's window, shouting Tommy's name, but the vehicle was already turning the corner onto Northern Boulevard. The last thing he saw was one of the men from the black van approaching the grocery store's entrance with casual confidence. The trap had been perfectly executed: separate the protector from the protected, then strike while the community was paralyzed with confusion. Vinny Marchetti had just demonstrated why he'd never been successfully opposed, and Mike Tyson was about to learn that some battles couldn't be won with fists alone. The holding cell at the 114th precinct reeked of disinfectant and despair. Mike Tyson sat on the concrete bench, his hands clenched into fists as he replayed the arrest in his mind. Every instinct screamed that he'd walked into a trap, but the magnitude of his miscalculation didn't become clear until Detective Morrison approached his cell with a predatory smile. Comfortable, Mike? Hope you're enjoying your accommodations, because you might be here a while. What do you want, Morrison? Want? I don't want anything. But my associate, Mr. Marchetti, wanted me to deliver a message. Morrison pulled out his cell phone, scrolling to a recent photo that made Tyson's blood freeze. The image showed Tommy Mitchell sitting in what looked like an office chair, his small hands zip-tied in front of him. The boy appeared unharmed but frightened, his eyes wide with confusion rather than panic. Someone off camera had given him a coloring book and crayons, a detail that made the kidnapping even more chilling. The kid's safe, Morrison said, enjoying Tyson's reaction. Vinny's not a monster. But that can change very quickly if certain people don't make smart decisions. The setup became crystal clear. While Tyson had been dismantling street-level operations, Vinny had been planning something far more sophisticated. The fabricated arrest warrant, the timing, the separation from Tommy. Every detail calculated to create this exact moment of powerlessness. "You son of a bitch," Tyson whispered, his voice carrying the kind of quiet menace that had once made heavyweight contenders refuse to enter the ring. Now, no need for hostility. This is business, Mike. Simple cost-benefit analysis. You leave Queens permanently, never come back, never contact any of these people again, and the boy goes home to his mother unharmed. You refuse, and Tommy Mitchell learns about the world's nastier realities. Morrison's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He answered with theatrical politeness. "Vincent?" "Yes, he's here." "Yes, I'm delivering your message now." He held the phone toward Tyson's cell. Vinny Marchetti's cultured voice carried clearly through the speaker, calm and reasonable, as if discussing stock portfolios rather than child abduction. "Mike, I hope you understand this isn't personal. You're a good man who got involved in something beyond your understanding. The boy is comfortable and will remain safe as long as you make the right choice." "Where is he?" "Somewhere secure. Fed, entertained, completely unharmed. He's actually been asking for you. Keep saying Mr. Mike will come save him." Touching faith, really. The psychological torture was expertly crafted. Tommy's trust in his hero was being used as a weapon against both of them. "What do you want?" "Complete disappearance. Leave Queens tonight. Never return, never contact Mrs. Mitchell or her son, never interfere with my business operations again. Do this, and Tommy wakes up tomorrow morning in his own bed with a story about getting lost that hill." Half believe himself, Tyson gripped the cell bars until his knuckles went white. "And if I refuse?" Then Tommy learns that heroes are just stories people tell children to help them sleep at night. The boy's young enough to adapt to new circumstances, new guardians, new cities. Children are remarkably resilient when properly motivated. The threat was delivered with the same pleasant tone Vinny had used in the grocery store. But the underlying message was clear. Tommy would disappear permanently into whatever system Vinny used to relocate families who couldn't pay tribute. "You have until sunrise to decide," Vinny continued. 12 hours to choose between your pride and that boy's future. I trust you'll make the right choice." The line went dead. Morrison pocketed his phone with satisfaction, clearly enjoying his role in destroying the neighborhood's brief taste of freedom. "Breakfast is at 6 a.m., Mike. Hope you work up an appetite thinking about your options." Alone in his cell, Tyson stared at the concrete wall where someone had scratched "Hope" in crude letters. For the first time since he was a teenager facing his first night in juvenile detention, Mike Tyson felt completely powerless. Somewhere in the city, an 8-year-old boy was asking for Mr. Mike to come save him, not knowing that his hero was trapped behind bars while the man who'd taken him counted down the hours to victory. The community that had celebrated their liberation just hours ago was about to learn that some freedoms came with prices too high to pay. Sunday dawn broke gray and cold over Queens, but Mike Tyson hadn't slept. He'd spent the night staring at the concrete wall of his holding cell, where the word "hope" seemed to mock him with each passing hour. At 6 a.m., a guard brought breakfast, powdered eggs and stale toast that tasted like cardboard and defeat. Sergeant Maria Santos managed to visit despite department politics that should have kept her away. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and frustration as she sat across from Tyson in the cramped interview room. "I've been suspended pending an investigation into my unauthorized cooperation with civilians," she said bitterly. "Internal Affairs is reviewing every case I've worked in the past 2 years, looking for procedural violations that will justify Morrison's accusations." The corruption ran deeper than either of them had imagined. Vinny hadn't just bought individual cops. He'd infected entire systems designed to protect innocent people. "Santos, the boy, I know. Missing person report was filed 3 hours ago, but it's being handled by Morrison's partner. They're calling it a family dispute and suggesting Tommy ran away after seeing his hero arrested." The psychological warfare was working exactly as Vinny had planned. Every system that should have protected Tommy was instead being used to justify his disappearance. "There's more," Santos continued, her voice heavy with defeat. Two other families received threatening calls overnight. The Rodriguez market was vandalized again. Mrs. Patterson called in a burglary that destroyed her apartment but somehow missed all her valuables. The neighborhood that had celebrated just 24 hours ago was now paralyzed with the return of familiar terror. Business owners who'd found courage were remembering why they'd been afraid in the first place. At 9 a.m., Diane Mitchell arrived for what might be her last visit. The woman who'd been transformed from victim to confident single mother was gone, replaced by someone hollowed out by grief and self-blame. Her nursing scrubs were wrinkled, her hair uncombed, her eyes red from crying. "They took him while I was inside getting milk," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just walked up like they knew him, said you'd sent them to pick him up. By the time I realized what happened, they were gone." Professional kidnappers who'd studied their target, learned his routines, understood exactly how to separate him from his mother without causing a scene. Tommy's trust in adults, carefully rebuilt over weeks of safety, had been weaponized against him. "Mike, I can't." Diane broke down completely, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than grief. "He's just a baby. He drew pictures of you protecting us, and now he's gone because I let you into our lives." The accusation hit Tyson harder than any punch he'd ever absorbed. Maybe she was right. Maybe communities were safer when Mike Tyson stayed away from them. Maybe his violent past had contaminated his attempts to do good. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, but she was already standing, gathering her purse with shaking hands. "They said if you leave Queens permanently, they'll bring him home. Just disappear, Mike. Please. I'll tell everyone you're a hero, but please just go." After she left, Tyson sat alone with the crushing weight of failure. Tommy was somewhere in the city, asking for Mr. Mike to save him, not understanding that heroes were just stories people told children to help them sleep. At noon, a guard brought another message from Morrison. "Your friend Marchetti wants to remind you about the deadline. 6 hours and counting." Through his cell's small window, Tyson could see a slice of Queens stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, Morris was probably closing Palmer's early, afraid to keep his store open without protection. Carlos Rodriguez was likely telling his grandson that boxing lessons were canceled indefinitely. Mrs. Patterson was sweeping up the wreckage of her apartment while wondering if she'd be safe anywhere in the neighborhood, and Tommy Mitchell was sitting in some anonymous room, coloring pictures while waiting for a rescue that might never come. The community that had stood together for one brief, shining week was scattered by fear. And Mike Tyson, former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, was trapped behind bars while an 8-year-old boy paid the price for his hubris. Vinnie Marchetti had won by turning Tyson's greatest strength, his protective instinct, into his greatest weakness. As afternoon shadows lengthened across his cell floor, Tyson faced the hardest decision of his life: sacrifice his pride to save one innocent child, or find some way to fight from a position of complete powerlessness. The clock kept ticking, and Tommy kept waiting for a hero who might not exist anymore. Sunday morning, 7 a.m. Mike Tyson was released from jail as mysteriously as he'd been arrested. The charges suddenly dropped due to procedural errors that Detective Morrison wouldn't explain. The corrupt cop avoided eye contact as he returned Tyson's personal effects, his usual smirk replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Outside the precinct, Morris Keller waited in his aging Honda, the engine running and his face grim with determination. The transformation in the elderly store owner was remarkable. Gone was the nervous, frightened man who'd counted tribute money with shaking hands. In his place sat someone who'd finally decided that some battles were worth fighting regardless of the consequences. "Get in," Morris said without preamble. "We need to move fast." They drove through a neighborhood transformed by the return of terror. Shuttered businesses lined streets that had buzzed with celebration just days ago. Empty playgrounds stood like monuments to fear, their swings motionless in the morning breeze. Families who'd walked freely now peered through curtains instead of enjoying Sunday morning. "Look what I did," Tyson said, his voice heavy with self-recrimination. "All of this is my fault." "No," Morris replied firmly, navigating through streets he'd known for 25 years. "This is what happens when good people try to live free. The question is whether we fight back or let the bastards win." They pulled into the alley behind Rodriguez Family Market, where Morris had arranged an emergency meeting. The store was closed, its windows covered with plywood after the previous night's vandalism, but light showed through the back entrance. Inside, an unlikely group had assembled in the stockroom. Sergeant Santos, officially suspended but unofficially committed. Mrs. Patterson, representing the senior residents who remembered when neighborhoods policed themselves. Carlos Rodriguez, whose father had built the market with honest sweat and refused to see it stolen by criminals. And 3 other business owners who decided that some freedoms were worth the risk. Santos found the compound, Morris announced, without ceremony. Long Island City, warehouse complex where Vinny runs his trucking business. Santos spread building schematics across a folding table, her suspended status meaning nothing in the face of a kidnapped child. Security cameras, armed guards, multiple buildings. It's designed to keep out police raids, but individual infiltration might be possible. The intelligence was comprehensive but daunting. Motion sensors, reinforced doors, professional security measures that had kept federal investigators at bay for years. Breaking into Vinny's fortress would require skills Tyson possessed, but surviving the escape might be impossible. "We go in. Together," Carlos said, his young voice carrying his father's determination. "All of us. Like a neighborhood watch, but for real." Mrs. Patterson nodded agreement. "My late husband fought in Korea. He always said the only thing necessary for evil to triumph was for good people to do nothing. Their courage was humbling, but Tyson knew this wasn't their fight. These were civilians, shopkeepers and grandmothers and teenagers with more heart than tactical training. Against Vinny's professionals, their bravery would only get them killed. "No," he said quietly. "This is something I have to do alone." The group dispersed after sharing everything they knew about Vinny's operation. Santos provided building layouts. Mrs. Patterson contributed detailed observations from months of watching suspicious vehicles, and Carlos offered his father's old military gear, standing alone in the empty market, surrounded by evidence of dreams deferred and hopes crushed. Tyson closed his eyes and remembered Tommy's innocent laughter echoing through Palmer's basement gym. The boy who'd drawn pictures of heroes protecting families from monsters. When he opened his eyes, his decision was made. Some battles could only be fought alone, and some children were worth any risk to save. The war for Tommy Mitchell was about to begin. Sunday evening, 6 p.m., Mike Tyson sat in Palmer's basement gym, surrounded by images of his boxing career and the sound of his own preparation. The photos on the concrete walls showed a young fighter who'd conquered the world through fury and skill. He needed to find that warrior again, but tempered with decades of hard-won wisdom. He studied the building schematics Santos had provided, memorizing guard rotations, security camera positions, and architectural details with the same intensity he'd once applied to opponent analysis. This wasn't just about rescue. It was about permanently ending Vinny's threat to every family in Queens. Morris arrived at 7 p.m. carrying Chinese takeout and a revelation that changed everything. "Mike, there's something I never told you about my time with the Marchetti family." The old man's hands trembled slightly as he spread architectural drawings across the folding table. 25 years ago, I wasn't just their accountant. I helped design security modifications for their warehouse compound. Tyson looked up from his tactical planning, studying Morris with new understanding. The nervous grocery store owner had layers of experience that ran deeper than anyone imagined. Vinny's father was paranoid about federal raids. Morris continued, his memory surprisingly sharp despite the decades. But he never considered the old storm drain system that runs beneath the building. It was built in the 1960s when the area was residential, before industrial development changed the landscape. Morris pulled out a hand-drawn map, his accountant's precision evident in every carefully rendered detail. Tunnel routes, maintenance access points, structural weaknesses that existed nowhere in official blueprints. The main drain connects to a maintenance tunnel that opens directly into the compound sub-basement. I supervised the concrete work. Myself, made sure the access point was hidden but not sealed. Insurance against the family if they ever turned on me. The escape route had been Morris's desperate contingency plan, created by a frightened man who understood he was working for people who killed anyone who knew too much. For 25 years, he'd carried the secret of Vinny's vulnerability, waiting for the right moment to use it. "Morris, this could get you killed. Vinny knows you used to work for his father. My whole life, I've been running from bullies. Morris replied, his voice steadier than Tyson had ever heard it. My brother David tried to stand up to the Marchetti family in 1998. They found his body in the East River 3 weeks later. That's when I learned these people don't just threaten, they deliver. The pain in Morris's eyes was old but still sharp. He'd been living with survivor's guilt for decades, watching good people pay tribute while he hid behind a false name and manufactured identity. But I also learned something else, Mike. They're not invincible. They just want people to believe. They are. As night fell, Morris led Tyson through the storm drain system's entry point, a maintenance hatch in an abandoned lot 3 blocks from Vinny's compound. The tunnels were more challenging than expected. Cramped spaces flooded with several inches of foul water, debris from decades of neglect, collapsed sections that forced dangerous detours. The city stopped maintaining these tunnels in the 1980s. Morris explained, his flashlight cutting through the darkness ahead. But the basic structure is sound. We just have to be careful about unstable sections. They navigated carefully through the underground maze, Morris's memory proving remarkably accurate despite the passage of time. The old man moved with surprising agility, driven by years of accumulated anger at being forced to live in fear. Mike, when we reach the compound, I want you to know something. If this goes wrong, if we don't make it out, tell Tommy that some adults really do keep their promises to protect children. The maintenance hatch beneath Vinny's compound appeared exactly where Morris remembered it, a metal grate set into the floor of what had once been a residential basement. Through the opening, they could see fluorescent lights and hear the distant hum of activity. Vinny's office is 3rd floor, southeast corner, Morris whispered, his voice barely audible. Tommy will be in the old supervisor's office on the 2nd floor. 2 guards, maybe 3, but they're not expecting anyone to come from below. Tyson prepared to enter the lion's den, knowing that everything depended on the next hour. Somewhere above them, an 8-year-old boy was probably drawing pictures while waiting for Mr. Mike to keep his promise about protecting children from monsters. The rescue mission was about to begin. The storm drain tunnels reeked of decades of urban runoff, but Morris Keller navigated them with surprising confidence. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing crumbling concrete walls and ankle-deep water that made every step treacherous. Stay close and watch your footing, Morris whispered, his voice echoing off the narrow walls. Some sections collapsed during Hurricane Sandy, and the repairs were never properly inspected. Mike Tyson followed carefully, his massive frame barely fitting through passages designed for maintenance crews rather than heavyweight champions. The tunnels were a claustrophobic nightmare, but they offered something invaluable: complete invisibility from Vinny's sophisticated security systems. How do you remember all this after 25 years? Tyson asked during a brief rest stop that Morris's smile was grim in the flashlight's glow. Survival has a way of burning details into your memory. I spent months planning escape routes from that compound, knowing that one day Vinny's father might decide I knew too much. They reached a collapsed section where decades of water damage had brought down part of the tunnel ceiling. Morris studied the debris with an engineer's eye, finding handholds and footholds that would allow passage without triggering a complete cave-in. This is the tricky part, Morris said. The collapse happened after my time, but the basic structure should hold our weight if we're careful. Navigating the damaged section required patience and precise movement. Loose concrete shifted underfoot, and rusted rebar protruded at dangerous angles. But Morris's determination was infectious. If a 65-year-old accountant could make this journey, a former heavyweight champion had no excuse for hesitation. That on the far side of the collapse, the tunnel opened into a wider maintenance corridor that ran directly beneath Vinny's compound. The air quality improved slightly, and the water level dropped to just a few inches, making movement easier. We're under the compound now, Morris announced, consulting his hand-drawn map. The access point is 50 yards ahead, directly below what used to be the supervisor's office. As they approached their destination, sounds filtered down through the concrete ceiling, footsteps, muffled conversations, the hum of industrial equipment. Vinny's operation was active even on Sunday night, testament to the scope of his criminal enterprise. Morris, I need you to understand something, Tyson said, stopping his companion with a gentle hand on the shoulder. Once I go up there, you head back through these tunnels and don't look back. Call Santos. Tell her everything. But don't try to help me directly. Mike, no arguments. You've done enough by getting me here. The rest is something I have to handle alone. Morris studied Tyson's face in the dim light, seeing determination that reminded him why this man had once been the most feared fighter in the world. But he also saw something else, a gentleness that hadn't existed in the young destroyer who terrorized heavyweight divisions. My brother David would have liked you, Morris said quietly. He always believed that real strength protected people instead of hurting them. They reached the maintenance hatch Morris remembered from his construction oversight days. Above them, fluorescent lights created a grid pattern through the metal grating, and they could hear voices discussing delivery schedules and territory assignments. The hatch opens into the sub-basement, Morris whispered, his voice barely audible. Storage rooms, mechanical equipment, but minimal security because they never imagined anyone approaching from below. Stairs to the main level are on the north wall, but you'll need to avoid the freight elevator. It's monitored. Tyson crouched beneath the hatch, every sense heightened as he prepared for what came next. Somewhere above him, Tommy Mitchell was probably coloring in that office chair, asking his captors when Mr. Mike was coming to take him home. Morris, if something happens to me in there, nothing's going to happen, Morris interrupted firmly. You're Mike Tyson. You've faced tougher opponents than Vincent Marchetti. This is different. In boxing, you know the rules. Maybe. But you also know how to win when everything's on the line. Morris clasped Tyson's hand briefly, then began his retreat through the tunnels, leaving the former champion alone beneath his most important fight. Above them, Vinny's compound hummed with activity, unaware that Iron Mike Tyson was about to remind everyone why legends never truly fade. The rescue of Tommy Mitchell was about to begin. Mike Tyson lifted the maintenance hatch with careful precision, emerging into Vinny Marchetti's compound like a shadow given form. The sub-basement stretched around him in all directions, a maze of storage rooms, mechanical equipment, and industrial infrastructure that hummed with the activity of legitimate business masking criminal enterprise that he moved through the darkness. With the same fluid precision that had once made him untouchable in boxing rings worldwide. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled, as he channeled decades of training into this single mission. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows between towering shelves of inventory, creating perfect concealment for a man who understood how to use space and timing as weapons. The first guard appeared near the freight elevator, a professional in his 30s who carried himself with military bearing. He was checking his phone when Tyson materialized from between storage containers, moving with explosive speed that left no time for reaction. The liver shot that had destroyed Rick Torino in Palmer's grocery store landed with surgical precision. The guard's eyes rolled back as his nervous system shut down, and he crumpled silently among boxes of automotive parts. Tyson caught the falling man and lowered him gently to the concrete floor, unconscious, not dead, because even in war there were lines that didn't need to be crossed. Radio chatter from the guard's earpiece revealed security patterns and check-in schedules. Tyson memorized the information while searching the unconscious man for access cards and weapons. A taser, zip tie restraints, and a key card that would open doors throughout the compound. The stairs to the main level were exactly where Morris had remembered them. Tyson climbed with the patience of a predator, pausing at each landing to analyze sounds and movements above. Years of studying opponents had taught him that information was more valuable than speed, and patience was deadlier than fury. On the ground floor, he encountered two more guards patrolling the warehouse proper. They were discussing football scores, relaxed and confident in their secure environment. Neither expected the destroyer who emerged from shadows they thought they controlled. The first guard went down to a combination that would have stopped any heavyweight contender. Left hook to the body followed by a right cross that switched off his lights like a circuit breaker. The second guard managed to reach for his radio before an uppercut lifted him completely off his feet and deposited him unconscious among the legitimate trucking equipment. Tyson confiscated their radios and weapons, building an arsenal while gathering intelligence about Tommy's exact location. Radio traffic confirmed the boy was being held in the second-floor supervisor's office, guarded by two men who seemed more like babysitters than security professionals. The main staircase was monitored by cameras, But Morris's architectural knowledge had revealed a maintenance stairway that bypassed most surveillance. Tyson climbed toward his objective, his mind focused on the simple mission that drove everything else. Bring Tommy home safely, the second-floor landing. He could hear voices through a closed door, adult conversation mixed with a child's questions. Tommy's voice, recognizable even through layers of concrete and steel, asking when he could go home to see his mom and Mr. Mike. "Your friend ain't coming, kid," one guard replied with casual cruelty. "He's too smart to try something stupid like that." The guard was about to learn just how wrong he could be. Tyson positioned himself outside the supervisor's office, checking his improvised weapons and reviewing the room's layout based on Morris's memory. 2 guards, 1 child, multiple escape routes if things went wrong. But nothing was going wrong. Not when Tommy Mitchell's freedom hung in the balance. He took a deep breath and remembered every lesson his trainers had ever taught him about controlled aggression, then prepared to remind Vincent Marchetti's employees why Mike Tyson had once been considered the most dangerous man alive. Tommy was about to discover that some heroes really did keep their promises. Mike Tyson positioned himself outside the supervisor's office where Tommy Mitchell was being held. Through the crack under the door, he could see shadows moving. 2 guards and 1 small boy whose voice carried the brave tremor of someone trying not to cry. "When can I go home?" Tommy asked for the dozenth time. "Mr. Mike promised he'd always protect me." "Your friend ain't coming, kid." Danny Torino, 26, replied with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been held accountable for anything. "He's probably halfway out of the city by now." His partner, Steve Collins, 31, was more professional, but equally dismissive. "Boss says you might be here a while, so get comfortable. We got more coloring books if you need them." Tommy's sniffled response cut through Tyson like a blade. "Mr. Mike doesn't break promises. He's coming." That unshakable faith from an 8-year-old gave Tyson everything he needed. He tested the door handle. Unlocked, because who would be crazy enough to infiltrate Vincent Marchetti's fortress? And entered the room like controlled lightning. The fight was over before either guard could reach their weapons. Tyson moved with the same explosive combination of speed and power that had made him legendary, but now refined by decades of wisdom about when and how to apply violence. Danny went down to a liver shot that folded him like a broken accordion. Steve managed to stand up from his chair before a perfectly timed uppercut sent him crashing into the wall behind him, unconscious before he hit the ground. Total elapsed time. For seconds, that Tommy's reaction was pure joy mixed with relief. "Mr. Mike, I knew you'd come. I told them you never break promises." Tyson knelt to the boy's level, quickly checking for injuries while cutting the zip ties that bound Tommy's small wrists. "Are you hurt, champ? Did they touch you?" "No, they were okay. Gave me coloring books and chicken nuggets. But I wanted to go home to Mom." Tommy's brave facade cracked slightly. "I was scared you forgot about me." "Never," Tyson said firmly, wrapping the boy in his jacket. "We're going home now, but we need to be very quiet, okay? Like playing hide and seek." He lifted Tommy carefully, the child's arms wrapping around his neck with complete trust. But their celebration was short-lived. Alarms began blaring throughout the compound as someone discovered the unconscious guards in the sub-basement. Red lights bathed the corridors as Tyson carried Tommy toward the maintenance stairway, but their escape route was already compromised. Armed security poured up the main stairs, and radio chatter indicated more reinforcements arriving from outside. "Mr. Mike, why are the lights flashing?" Tommy whispered against his ear. "Just the building's way of saying goodbye," Tyson replied. But his mind was calculating distances, obstacles, and the tactical nightmare of protecting a child while fighting through professional security. They reached the second-floor landing. As the first wave of reinforcements arrived, Tyson set Tommy down behind a concrete pillar, his voice gentle despite the chaos erupting around them. "Stay right here, champ. No matter what happens, stay behind this pillar until I come get you." "Mr. Mike, are you scared?" Tyson looked at the innocent trust in Tommy's eyes and found his answer. "Not anymore, champ. Not when I'm protecting you." The first security team rounded the corner with military precision, but they were facing iron. Mike Tyson at his most motivated, a former champion fighting not for titles or money, but for one 8-year-old boy who'd never stopped believing in heroes. What followed would remind everyone in that building why legends earned their reputations in the first place. Mike Tyson fought through Vincent Marchetti's security forces. Like a man possessed, each movement a perfect fusion of legendary boxing skills and desperate paternal fury. Tommy remained safely behind his concrete pillar, wide-eyed but unharmed, as his hero systematically dismantled everyone who stood between them and freedom. But as they reached the ground floor, their path to the tunnel entrance was blocked by a man in an expensive suit flanked by four armed professionals. Vincent Marchetti stood calm and composed despite the chaos around him, looking more like a Fortune 500 CEO than a crime boss whose fortress was under assault. "Mike," Vinny said with genuine admiration, his voice cutting through the wailing alarms. "I have to admit, I'm impressed. But this is where it ends." The four guards had their weapons drawn but weren't aiming directly at Tyson yet. Professional. Discipline mixed with uncertainty about engaging a legend in close quarters, especially when that legend was protecting a child. "You've had quite a run tonight," Vinny continued, adjusting his tie with the casual confidence of someone who'd never lost a final confrontation. "My security chief estimates you've taken out 12 of my people. That's impressive for a man your age." Tommy peeked around Tyson's massive frame, his 8-year-old mind trying to process the adult conversation while staying brave like Mr. Mike had taught him. "But this ends here," Vinny said, producing a pistol with the same casual motion he might used to check his watch. "I can't let you leave with the boy. Bad for business, you understand. People need to know that crossing Vincent Marchetti has consequences." The psychological warfare began immediately, Vinny demonstrating the research he'd conducted on his opponent. "You think you're saving him? You're a violent man, Mike. Violence follows you everywhere. That boy will never be safe around someone with your history." Tyson's response was quiet, measured, carrying the wisdom of hard-won experience. "Maybe you're right about my past, but tonight isn't about my history. It's about his future. Touching, but ultimately irrelevant." Vinny's gun moved slightly, not pointing at Tyson, but making its presence unmistakably clear. "You have two choices. Walk away now and never come back, or watch everything you've tried to protect get destroyed anyway." Tommy, despite his fear, stepped out from behind Tyson's protective bulk. "You're a bad man," he said with the fearless honesty that only children possessed. "Mr. Mike is good. He protects people." Vinny's smile was genuinely amused. "Kid's got spirit. I respect that. But spirit doesn't stop bullets, and it doesn't change the reality of power in this city." The standoff stretched like a rubber band, about to snap. Tyson calculated angles and distances while protecting Tommy, managing four armed professionals and their boss's psychological warfare. Years of facing the world's most dangerous heavyweights had taught him to find opportunities in impossible situations. "You know what your problem is, Vinny?" Tyson asked, his voice carrying the quiet confidence that had once struck fear into championship contenders. "You've spent so long buying people and intimidating families that you forgot what happens when someone who can't be bought or intimidated finally shows up. And what's that? You learn the difference between being feared and being respected." Vinny's composure cracked slightly, his businessman's facade revealing the frightened criminal underneath. He'd built his empire on the certainty that everyone had a price or a pressure point. But Mike Tyson was proving immune to both approaches. "Enough philosophy," Vinny snapped, his gun now pointing directly at Tommy. "The boy dies unless you walk away. Right now? Your choice, hero." That was Vincent Marchetti's fatal mistake. Threatening an innocent child in front of a man who'd spent years learning that real strength protected rather than destroyed. Tyson's smile was slight, patient, and absolutely terrifying. Every restraint he'd maintained throughout the rescue evaporated as Vinny crossed the one line that could never be uncrossed. "Tommy," Tyson said quietly, his voice carrying the calm certainty of natural law asserting itself. "Close your eyes, champ. The bad man is about to learn why some people should never be threatened." Vincent Marchetti's fatal error was pointing his gun at Tommy Mitchell. The moment that weapon shifted toward an innocent child, every restraint Mike Tyson had maintained throughout the night disappeared like morning mist. The four guards opened fire as Tyson moved, but they were aiming at where he had been, not where he was going. The same explosive speed that had once made him untouchable in championship rings now served a higher purpose: Protecting 8-year-old innocents from adult evil, Tyson used the industrial environment like a chess master, turning concrete pillars and machinery into cover while closing the distance to his enemies. The peekaboo defense that had frustrated heavyweight contenders for decades made automatic weapons look clumsy and inaccurate. The first guard fell to a combination that belonged in boxing textbooks. A perfectly timed slip followed by a devastating uppercut that lifted the man completely off his feet. The second guard managed to empty his clip before Tyson reached him, every shot missing by inches as the former champion moved like liquid violence between obstacles that a right cross that had. Once knocked out champions ended the second guard's involvement in the fight. He crumpled among the shipping containers, unconscious but breathing, because even in war there were lines Mike Tyson wouldn't cross. The third and fourth guards tried to coordinate their attack, using professional tactics against an opponent who'd spent decades studying how to neutralize multiple threats simultaneously. But they were fighting a legend at his most motivated, a man protecting the child who'd taught him that heroism wasn't about destroying opponents, but about lifting up innocence. That Tyson's movement between them was surgical, each punch landing with precision that spoke to thousands of hours of training refined by decades of experience. Neither guard landed a meaningful blow before joining their colleagues in unconsciousness. Vincent Marchetti backed against the wall, his pistol wavering as he realized his professional soldiers had been systematically dismantled by one man whose prime was supposedly decades behind him. "This is impossible," Vinny whispered, his businessman's composure completely shattered. "You're 58 years old. You should be slow, weak. Age is just a number," Tyson replied, advancing with the patient certainty of natural justice. "Experience is forever." Vinny fired wildly, panic overwhelming his business school training as he emptied his clip at a target who moved like smoke between industrial equipment. When the gun clicked empty, Tyson was already within arm's reach. The final confrontation wasn't between equals. It was between someone who'd built his empire through fear and intimidation, and someone who'd learned that real power came from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Vinny threw a desperate punch that Tyson slipped effortlessly, countering with a left hook to the body that sent Marchetti to his knees. A follow-up right cross ended the crime boss's reign with the same finality that had concluded dozens of championship fights. Vincent Marchetti lay unconscious on the concrete floor of his own compound, defeated not by violence for its own sake, but by a man who discovered that the greatest victories came from defending the innocent. Tommy emerged from behind his pillar, running to Tyson with complete trust despite the chaos around them. "Mr. Mike, you did it. You beat all the bad men." Tyson scooped the boy up, holding him close while sirens approached from outside. "Yeah, champ. It's over. Let's go home to your mom." Police cars surrounded the compound as Sergeant Santos arrived with federal backup, ready to arrest everyone involved in Vincent Marchetti's criminal enterprise. The corruption that had protected Vinny for years crumbled in the face of overwhelming evidence and testimony from victims who'd finally found their courage as they walked toward the exit. Tommy looked up at his hero with the innocent wisdom that only children possessed. "Mr. Mike, you're the best superhero ever." "I'm not a superhero, champ. I'm just someone who keeps his promises." But walking through those doors with Tommy safe in his arms, Mike Tyson felt something he hadn't experienced since his first championship belt, the pure satisfaction of using his strength for something that truly mattered. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Palmer's family grocery overflowed with customers, news crews, and neighbors celebrating the end of Vincent Marchetti's reign of terror. The cramped aisles buzzed with conversations about federal arrests, seized assets, and the neighborhood's unlikely savior who'd kept his promise to protect them all. Mike Tyson stood near the checkout counter, giving measured responses to reporters who wanted to hear about the previous night's events. He deflected most questions, focusing attention on the community's courage rather than his own actions. "The real heroes are the business owners who found their voices," he told a persistent CNN reporter. "The parents who decided their children deserved better. The cops like Sergeant Santos who never stopped fighting corruption. I just reminded a few bullies that actions have consequences." Tommy Mitchell sat at his usual cafe table, surrounded by other children as he drew pictures of the previous night's adventure. His artwork had evolved from simple stick figures to more sophisticated scenes showing Mr. Mike leading them all to safety. And then he carried me right through all the bad men, Tommy explained to his fascinated audience. They couldn't catch us because Mr. Mike is too fast and too strong. Diane approached the table with coffee for Tyson and juice for Tommy, her transformation from frightened victim to confident mother complete. The shadows were gone from her eyes, replaced by the kind of peace that came from knowing her son was truly safe. The federal prosecutors want to interview Tommy later this week, she told Tyson quietly. But they say he won't have to testify. In court, Marchetti's organization is rolling over so fast they don't need additional witnesses. Vincent Marchetti himself sat in federal custody, his empire dismantled and his corruption network exposed. Detective Morrison and 3 other cops had been arrested on charges ranging from conspiracy to kidnapping. The psychological foundation of fear that had controlled the neighborhood was crumbling faster than anyone had imagined possible. Sergeant Santos, now Detective Santos, promoted to lead a new anti-corruption unit, arrived with the final paperwork. Her brother Miguel was in the passenger seat of her patrol car, wheelchair-bound but smiling as neighborhood children surrounded him with questions about police work. 43 businesses are free of tribute payments, Santos reported with satisfaction. 17 arrests, including 6 corrupt officials. The federal task force estimates Marchetti's network stole over $2 million annually from this community alone. Morris Keller emerged from behind his register, no longer the nervous man who'd counted extortion money with shaking hands. He'd reclaimed his real name and identity, becoming an advocate for small business owners facing similar intimidation. Mike, Morris said, approaching with a formal document. The community association voted unanimously. We want you to be our official neighborhood coordinator. Full-time position, real salary, health benefits. Carlos Rodriguez and his father joined the growing crowd around Tyson, their rebuilt market already showing signs of prosperity without criminal taxation. Mr. Tyson, my father wants to donate space for your boxing program. Says the neighborhood needs a place where kids learn discipline and respect. The offers were generous and heartfelt, but Tyson had already made his decision during the long night in Marchetti's compound. He'd found something he didn't know he was looking for, a community that needed him not for his fame or his past, but for who he chose to be today. I appreciate the formal offers, he said, his voice carrying across the crowded store, but I already have a job. Morris pays me fair wages to stock shelves and help customers. That's enough. He paused, looking around at faces that had become family over the past weeks. But I will open that boxing program in the basement. Teach kids about discipline, respect, and standing up for what's right. Anyone who wants to learn is welcome. Tommy held up his latest drawing. The grocery store with a boxing ring in the basement, surrounded by stick figures of different sizes, all raising their hands in victory. Mr. Mike, Tommy said proudly, this is our home now, right? You're going to stay and teach us to be brave. Tyson looked at the innocent artwork, then at Diane's hopeful expression, then at the community of people who'd stood together when it mattered most. Outside, children played freely on sidewalks where they'd once walked in fear. Inside, customers shopped without looking over their shoulders. Yeah, champ, he said, ruffling Tommy's hair while accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Patterson. I found where I belong. As the news crews packed up and the crowd dispersed, Tyson sat with Tommy and Diane at the cafe table, helping with math homework while customers browsed peacefully around them. Through the front windows, he could see Carlos teaching younger children basic boxing stances on the sidewalk, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze that it was wonderfully, perfectly ordinary, proof that the greatest strength was often found in the simplest acts of protection and care Mike Tyson had. Finally come home. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.